On this Thursday night, the Prime Minister pushes back on pressure for a prisoner swap.
I deeply disagree with them.
Justin Trudeau rejects calls to release Meng Wanzhou in hopes it would make China release the two Michaels.
But it is not just the two Michaels who are at question here. It is every Canadian who travels to China or anywhere else overseas.
Quebec's quiet change to its COVID-19 communication strategy, critics call it incomprehensible. The pandemic's indirect impact on kids' health, what doctors want parents to know. And tainted grapes don't mean sour grapes.
You just have to get creative.
Canadian wineries bottle up innovation born out of a crisis.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The Prime Minister is rejecting mounting pressure to release top Chinese telecom executive Meng Wanzhou in hopes it would prompt China to let Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig come home to Canada. Justin Trudeau says randomly arresting Canadians doesn't give China leverage over the government of Canada. He is rejecting the advice of 19 high-profile Canadians who wrote a letter to him, imploring him to release Meng Wanzhou. The signatories include a former Supreme Court justice, former Liberal and Conservative foreign affairs ministers, a former justice minister, a former NDP leader, and former diplomats. It says the Minister of Justice has the legal authority to act now in the extradition process of Meng Wanzhou, and it says we contend the time is past due for the minister to do just that, to end the Meng proceeding and to bring the two Michaels home. It says not only are their lives at stake, Canada's foreign policy is also being held hostage. But Justin Trudeau said today he does not agree with them and will not let China get away with what he calls hostage diplomacy. David Akin is with me from Ottawa. David, what exactly did the Prime Minister say?
Well, Trudeau was clearly aware of the pedigree of the group that signed that letter, but he was having none of their arguments.
I respect the distinguished Canadians who put forward that letter, but I deeply disagree with them.
Now, as for the Chinese, they took note of the status of those signatories, too. Remember, this was an extraordinary letter. And so on Wednesday, the spokesman for China's foreign ministry, well, he took the hint and he said the situation of the two Canadians could be, quote, resolved if Canada dropped the extradition proceeding against Meng. So that is the first time a senior Chinese official has essentially admitted that China is holding the two Michaels hostage and would barter them for Meng's release. Now, well, Trudeau said that he empathizes with the families of the two Michaels and he understands their suffering. But as Prime Minister, Trudeau said he must consider some broader issues.
The bigger question is whether or not we want China or other countries to get the message that all they have to do to get leverage over the Canadian government is randomly arrest a couple of Canadians. That not only puts Canadians in difficulty now, but puts them in difficulty and in danger in the coming years.
Now, Trudeau said his government intends to make it, quote, crystal clear that Canada has an independent court system and that those legal processes will proceed free of any political pressure, including from foreign governments. Donna?
David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. Now to the pandemic. The number of confirmed cases around the world is fast approaching 10 million, and the number of deaths is nearing 500,000. The United States has by far the most cases and the most deaths right now. But some countries that had controlled their outbreaks are again seeing an uptick in numbers. Australia, once nearly free of the new coronavirus, is again ramping up its response. There were 37 new cases there today, Australia's biggest one-day spike since April. The country now has more than 7,500 known cases. And in Victoria, Australia's hardest-hit state, a testing blitz is underway. Ambulances and mobile test centers are set up in residential areas. The goal is to do 100,000 tests in 10 days. The Army is being deployed to go door to door to encourage people to get tested. India recorded more than 16,000 new cases of COVID-19 in 24 hours. That's the highest single-day increase there. There are now more than 481,000 cases in India, the fourth highest in the world. Because of limited testing, it's believed the real number is likely much higher. And in the U.S., concern keeps growing as cases of COVID-19 are rising in at least 29 states. Among the hardest hit are Texas, California, and Florida. The U.S. also marked a grim milestone, reporting over 45,000 new cases on Wednesday, a record for a single day. More than 2.4 million people are now known to have COVID-19 in the U.S. That is only the people who have been tested. According to new estimates from the Centers for Disease Control, the real number could be 10 times higher. Jennifer Johnson reports.
After months of downplaying COVID-19, Texas is setting disturbing records, 5,500 new cases in one day. The governor, who last week said there was no reason to be alarmed, has announced a temporary pause in any additional reopenings.
We're at that stage now where if you do not need to go out and go to work or have to go to the store or engage in some other activity, the best thing that you can do is to just stay at home.
In early May, U.S. President Donald Trump publicly praised Greg Abbott as the governor who reopened restaurants, retail stores, malls, and movie theaters.
He's a very special governor. He's done a phenomenal job.
Now intensive care beds in Houston are at near capacity.
Already today, we transferred a patient in, and immediately we had to intubate her. She's in her 40s.
Business owners are frustrated too.
I don't know how many people have to get sick and die so I can stay in business.
New records are also being set in California and Florida. A mask mandate creating a fiery debate in Palm Beach County.
You literally cannot mandate somebody to wear a mask knowing that that mask is killing people.
But medical experts strongly recommend wearing masks as an added level of protection along with physical distancing. In these new hotspots, the greatest increase in new COVID-19 cases is among 18 to 34-year-olds.
So they're not going down a level, going out with masks and social distancing. They're going back to the way they were. They said, you know, it's not going to affect me dramatically. I can't handle this.
White House officials not too concerned about the surge.
We just have to live with that. That's, I think, part of the story of the declining impact of the virus.
But government health officials call the trend disturbing and now predict COVID-19 will kill 180,000 Americans by October. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
A new analysis confirms what we know about the toll COVID-19 has taken on people in long-term care homes in Canada and reveals how bad Canada's record is on that compared to other countries. The Canadian Institute for Health Information says as of May 25th, long-term care residents made up 81% of all reported COVID-19 deaths in Canada, and that's nearly double the average in 16 other developed nations. There are big differences between the provinces and territories. Long-term care deaths accounted for 97% of COVID-19 deaths in Nova Scotia. In Quebec, Ontario, and Alberta, it was more than 70%. Today, the numbers in Quebec have stabilized. The province reported 7 more people have died of COVID-19. It's the 9th day in a row there have been fewer than 10 deaths. And it's the last time the public will get a daily update on the numbers in that province. Quebec has decided to release data every week instead of every day. That has surprised a lot of people. Mike Armstrong explains Quebec's new strategy.
There's an old trick governments employ when they don't want news covered. They release it on a Friday afternoon or a holiday. Well, as Quebecers were celebrating the Fête Nationale Wednesday, the province's health ministry slid a line into its daily COVID-19 update. There would no longer be daily updates. Going forward, it will be on a weekly basis every Thursday. Opposition politicians were quick to pounce, the Parti Québécois leader demanding an explanation, while the Liberal leader called it totally incomprehensible.
Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Well, defending the decision fell to the Director of Public Health. Horacio Arruda argues the daily numbers have fallen to the point publishing them doesn't make sense.
As there is less and less cases and less people dying from it, the stability of the data when we publish every day is not as good as if we look at it in a week.
Now, critics argue the move is a blow to transparency. There are other provinces in Canada in a much better situation still giving daily updates, even if, as is the case with PEI, they haven't had a new case in close to 2 months. Quebec added 142 new cases Thursday.
When you do daily data releases, you keep people aware, and I think you send out a cue that they need to maintain vigilance.
There are those who argue the opposite. Putting out numbers every day can overload the public. It almost becomes white noise that ends up being ignored.
If you get all the small numbers all the time, people actually won't notice them anymore. They won't pay attention, and they will have the false impression that everything's under control, and they can forget about that virus.
A lot of experts say they don't watch the daily numbers closely, that they look at trend lines, fluctuations up and down, actually distract from what's happening overall.
My eyes automatically go to the trend line of what's been happening over the last 7 days. And that's much more informative, I find, than your daily numbers.
Quebec's health department says it will still be watching the numbers daily. If there's a flare-up, it could and would go back to daily updates. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
The driver of a car involved in a deadly crash in Brampton, Ontario, has now been charged. Global News has confirmed 20-year-old Brady Robertson is facing several charges, including dangerous operation causing death in the fatal collision last week. He's scheduled to appear in court next month.
Despite the pain and heartache we feel, we were blessed to have had these beautiful souls in our life.
The crash killed Carolina Chasula and her 3 daughters. At their funeral today, 4 white caskets were brought before the altar and mourners spread out in the pews in accordance with physical distancing guidelines. She was an elementary school teacher and her girls were aged 6, 4, and 1. The service was closed to the public because of COVID-19 restrictions, but mourners were able to watch a live stream and audio of the service was played outside the church. In Nova Scotia, the remains of 4 Canadian Armed Forces members killed when their helicopter went down were returned to their hometowns. The RCMP escorted the motorcade near Halifax today. All 6 on board a military Cyclone helicopter were killed when it went down off the coast of Greece in April. Captain Brendan McDonald, Captain Maxime Miron-Morin, Master Corporal Matthew Cousins, and Sub-Lieutenant Matthew Pike were all from Nova Scotia. Captain Kevin Hagen's homecoming will be held this Saturday in Victoria, BC. And Sub-Lieutenant Abigail Cobro's remains returned to Canada in May. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. A Calgary toddler in a holding pattern. Coming up, why he'll have to wait months for an important surgery. Plus, the new NHL arena with a name and goal unlike any other. The federal government unveiled a new program today, part of its $9 billion plan to help young people, many of whom are struggling to find summer jobs in the midst of this pandemic. Post-secondary students and recent graduates who want to volunteer to help their communities recover can now apply for newly created service opportunities. They're posted online through the government's I Want to Help website, which includes a list of local organizations. There will be compensation for the volunteer work. Students and graduates can earn $1,000 for every 100 hours worked, with a cap set at $5,000 or 500 hours. Well, we know young people and children are much less likely to get seriously ill from COVID-19 than people who are over the age of 60, but our kids are still paying a price in other ways, especially those who are waiting for surgery. Tonight, Heather Urix West looks at the indirect harm COVID-19 is having on Canadian children.
2-year-old Nash Ritchie is waiting for surgery, and because of COVID-19, he'll likely be waiting for some time.
I called to do a checkup and they said it might actually be another 9 months in addition to the time we've already waited.
The Calgary toddler was born with a health condition. The longer he waits to have it corrected, the higher his chances of developing health problems down the road. But the pandemic has created backlogs in surgery, just one of many indirect impacts the virus is having on children's health.
Severe illness and hospital admissions related to COVID-19 have been uncommon in children and young people, yet they will experience substantial indirect physical, social, and mental health effects related to the pandemic.
In an analysis published in this week's Canadian Medical Association Journal, Dr. Peter Gill and co-authors take a look at what we know so far. For one, hospital visits by children are down. In the UK, Ireland, and Italy, pediatric admissions to emergency departments fell by 75% during lockdown periods. In Canada, Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto reported 30% fewer children in the emergency emergency room in March and 62% fewer kids in April compared to last year. And while that may be because fewer kids are getting sick or injured while at home, it may also be because parents are choosing to delay care.
We want to communicate to families that healthcare is open, we're available. We've modified our health system to be safe. And certainly if you're worried about your child, you should seek care.
There is also evidence childhood vaccine schedules are being interrupted. In May, the World Health Organization estimated 80 million children have had vaccinations canceled or delayed. But the concerns extend beyond children's physical health. Social isolation protocols are having an impact on their mental and emotional well-being too. Researchers say many of these impacts could lead to long-term health concerns.
I'm scared for him.
For Miranda Ritchie, there is real concern that her son will feel the impact of this pandemic long after the virus is no longer a threat. Heather Urex West, Global News, Calgary.
Ahead, the rare find that made a miner Tanzania's newest millionaire.
You're watching Global National.
The world's largest online retailer, Amazon, has bought the naming rights to the future home of Seattle's new NHL franchise. CEO Jeff Bezos plans to call it Climate Pledge Arena and says it will be the first net zero carbon certified arena in the world. Recycled bins will replace garbage cans and reclaimed rainwater will be used to create what could be the greenest ice in the NHL. Amazon, which has been criticized for not doing enough to combat climate change, didn't disclose how much it's paying for the rights. The venue in downtown Seattle is undergoing a major renovation to accommodate the new franchise team set to begin playing next year. Voting is underway in Russia that could reset the clock and keep President Vladimir Putin in office until 2036. The 7-day vote was meant to start on July 1st, but authorities opened polling stations a week ahead of schedule. They say it's to stop overcrowding during the pandemic. Critics say Putin has been in power far too long and fear the vote will mean he'll stay there much longer. It could allow him to run for 2 more back-to-back 6-year terms. The Democratic Republic of Congo has declared its deadliest Ebola outbreak over. The outbreak began in August 2018 and it killed more than 2,000 people. It was the world's second largest Ebola outbreak on record and the 10th to hit the DRC since 1976. The health minister says it was the longest, most complex and deadliest fight in the Central African nation's history. A small-scale miner from Tanzania is celebrating a big discovery. He is now a millionaire after finding the world's largest ever tanzanite stones, some of the rarest gemstones on Earth. He earned over $3 million for the 2 tanzanite stones, which can only be found in a tiny area in the country's north. They are the largest ever to be found. They weigh 9.2 and 5.8 kilograms each. The man, who is 52 years old, sold the stones to the country's mining ministry and says he'll use the money to build a shopping mall and school for his community and to hold one big party. When life gives you bad grapes, what do you make? Next, the good solution from BC. This stunning time-lapse video shows a decade in the life of our sun. Every second is one day. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory released this to mark a decade of its work. It's gathered more than 400 million high-resolution images of the sun, and it's enabled countless new discoveries about the workings of our closest star and how it influences the solar system. NASA has announced it's naming its headquarters in Washington, D.C. after Mary W. Jackson. In 1958, she became NASA's first black female engineer and played a pivotal role in helping American astronauts reach space. She was also one of NASA's hidden figures, made famous in the Hollywood movie. NASA says the name change is a reminder that Mary Jackson is one of the many incredible and talented professionals in NASA's history who contributed to the agency's success. Well, with the pandemic looming so large in our lives, it's easy to forget the threat wildfires have posed to Canadians in the past. In 2018, BC had its worst fire season on record. More than 1 million hectares of land was on fire, including some vineyards. The smoke created a crisis, or so the winemakers thought. Robin Gill explains.
In 2018, the flames were looming large over BC's Okanagan Valley. one of the worst fire seasons on record. It was frightening for winery owners, whose businesses were in danger. Most escaped severe damage, but going into harvest season, they knew that some of their grapes had been tinged with smoke. At Vanessa Vineyard, it wouldn't be until the wine was actually in the bottles and tested by the team that they knew it wasn't up to standard.
We could have poured it down the drain. It probably would have been the cheapest and easiest for us to do. But, you know, when I heard that, you know, the COVID hit and that we could make good use of it.
Vanessa Vineyard teamed up with a distillery and brewed close to 600 liters of wine valued at $35,000 into hand sanitizer. Farmers are always at the mercy of Mother Nature, and when the temperatures rise, they have to keep an eye out for fire season.
The trick or trouble with smoke taint is that it doesn't necessarily show up when you're vinifying, when you're making the wine. So you're never really too sure until really it's in the bottle or when you're bottling.
That forced wineries to get creative.
This is the bottle, what we affectionately refer to mulled Fumé Noir from
Fitzpatrick Winery mulled over some ideas and, well, came up with mulled wine for this coming Christmas.
You just have to get creative, and you know, Mother Nature dictates what we do. You know, at the end, we're farmers, and we got to adjust accordingly.
Adjust and acclimate. Vanessa Vineyard may be taking a loss on the wine, but the new product is headed to homeless shelters.
As my mom says, who's 96, you know what, these are the times that you do things that you help people that need it the most.
These are indeed those times, and a pairing of ideas can produce some good notes. Robin Gill, Global News, Vancouver.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with a Canadian band playing catch-up ahead of Canada Day. Walk Off the Earth is covering the song Oh Canada with bottles of ketchup. Using a Canadian condiment, the band is adding to virtual Canada Day celebrations with a saucy little anthem. Thanks for watching. Robin Gill will be here tomorrow, and I'll see you on Sunday for the new reality. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.